Mics are hot. Switching over in 3, 2, 1, action.
Hey.
Hey.
Welcome to the Technocrat Live. I'm your host, Matthew Newhall, and tonight is a little bit different. Sorry, folks, no dystopia report. It's all going to be about Civgene and Psychopaths and what I've been working on for quite a while. So I just want to say, first of all, I'm really psyched that I see some people already tuned in. Awesome. I'm really psyched about doing this show tonight because I really want to hear smart and even off-the-wall questions about Psychopaths, about Civgene, what that is, what I'm doing. I didn't really know how to write this. I've done one other talk on Civgene before, so I've done one other talk on Civgene before, and it was a totally different focus. It was a focus on trying to get scientific acceptance. So this is more user-friendly, let's just say that. Okay, so let's get right into it. So a lot of people, I mentioned the word Civgene. The question is, what is Civgene? So let's, Steve, let's bring up the website right away. So Civgene is a group of scientific theories that I have sorry about that. I gave Steve no warning. A group of scientific theories that I put together about psychopaths and non-psychopaths and how they interact and where their places are in society, like how do they interact with each other and how do they socialize. A lot of this came after I read Dr. Hare's and a few other books about psychopaths, and it came through to me. So if you like anything I'm talking about today, but you think it isn't deep enough, if I don't get into enough information, then please go check out civgene.matthewnewhall.com. So, all right. How do you learn about this? So the site is actually really popular. I don't normally talk about how popular it is, and I'm still not going to give you numbers, but it is really popular. It's been bigger than this show all along. So probably I'll be relinking over here to that site, and it's actually been pretty successful, except maybe is a formal scientific document, because I have an associate's degree. I don't have a PhD, so nobody's going to listen to me. Yeah. So, but that actually, I think in this case, that's a mistake, and not just because it's me. So, let me just put this in perspective. I have 7 different pages up on the website describing how to get started with Civgene and trying to figure out what I'm talking about. The best way is going to be hopefully this video, but the second best way is to go to the background page. But I have 7 pages describing just how the site's structured and how the different theories.
You have 7 pages of the site describing the site?
I have 7 pages of the site describing the site. Yeah, it's insane. I have 172 posts, 120 topics. So these are words, like keywords, 120 different keywords that all link to different stories, and they're not all in this. Every story doesn't have all 120 keywords. It's like somewhere between 4 and 10 on each. So I've been doing this for 10 years. Basically, I came up with this theory in 2011, and I've been building this site shortly thereafter ever since. And I've been posting there on average every month or so. So there's a lot of stuff up there. Anyway, so check it out, and it's written in a really scholarly way, so I sacrifice readability and ease of readability for detail. At least that's been how it is for the latter half of it. So, yeah, so that's kind of gives you the idea of the body of work. I'm never revisionist, and this is actually important. So all versions of that website are up on GitHub. So if I've written a word on that website, it's in the GitHub Git tree somewhere. So I don't hide anything. I do change things as I find that are wrong. I have had to go to the site and make a couple of minor changes, but of course minor is not minor when you have that many pages, so you have to go through a lot of different things and to change the wording. But overall, I haven't had to change too much. But there have been changes, and that's how you find them if you don't. So I don't make things vanish and pretend I didn't say that. That's not me. This, well, let me get into this. I mentioned it's hard to read, and also let me get into what Civgene is. So it's the difference, it's a system of scientific theories about interactions and differences between psychopaths and the rest of us. And by the rest of us, I mean non-psychopaths. I'm not trying to exclude psychopaths, it's easier to talk about that. I may use the word empath while I'm talking about this as a shortcut to being simply not a psychopath. So everybody else that isn't a psychopath, who is human, is an empath.
Is it normie?
Yeah, I don't want to say normie.
That makes them abnormal, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not even that they are kind of abnormal, but it's the easiest, quickest way I found to split them up. So, all right. So why do you care? All right. So this whole thing's in the form of questions. So, yeah, this is about psychopaths. So everybody cares about psychopaths. Everybody's entertained by them, and there's good reason that you want to know more about them. It's really important. You know, they can be dangerous. You need to think about dead man switches, or you'll be owned by psychopaths. Literally, you'll become a slave. If you interact with a psychopath on a regular basis, you don't know what they are. You treat them like how you want to be treated, and you don't treat them how they are going to decide that you are their slave and they are your master, and that will be the entirety of your interaction. They don't just see you as that; they see every person, including other psychopaths, like that. It's a hierarchical tree like you find in nature. You know, just like a troop of chimps or a pack of wolves, they just want to be on top or below. They're not comfortable being equals, walking side by side with someone. So I have some secrets about psychopaths that I will not tell anyone. So there's lots and lots of stuff that I've told people, but I have secrets that I'm keeping to myself because they're powerful and they're useful. So they're mine, and you're not getting them. So, also, I just wanted to say that that's the nice part about breaking ground. Steve, could you bring up that chart, the really complex one, the one with all the axis of human rights is what I call it.
Okay, that makes it easier.
Yeah, let's leave that up for a while. So while I talk about this, so this chart, it'll be up in a second. This chart is the latest chart. And so this is the revised political compass. Now this is just one of many things that I've done on this site. They're not all graphical, although I think I'm going to be leaning more towards graphical stuff. So I just want to talk about this one chart as an example of the kind of stuff that I'm doing up on civgene.matthewnewhall.com. So, there are 55 separate details on this chart. So if I tried to explain those 55 details, you'd all fall asleep. You'd be like, this is boring. I don't care about this. I don't want to listen to this anymore. So that's why I'm going to be heading more towards the chart direction. But just from making this one chart, I figured out a whole bunch of new things. So let me give you a quick example. I can win any political argument with this chart. I've just completely shut down a dozen arguments already on the internet, where people were just going, and I just show them this chart, and they fall over. And let me give you one thing that I've realized just in this chart. I'm not going to explain how I got there. If you look up at the top of the chart, at the top of the triangle, you got left on the left and right on the right. Now, we don't do politics on the show, and this isn't going to change. So this is going to be civics purely. There aren't any political words in here. If you look, that's not an accident. So while I call it a political chart, it really kind of isn't. But anyway, so left is currency focused and right is property focused. This is something that I figured out because currency and property are two of what I figured out to be a handful, and there's going to be more, of human rights that derive directly from human behavior. Why does this matter? Well, because if you realize when you look at this and you realize that those are the directions that people are approaching human rights from, depending on whether they're on the left or they're on the right, you realize that they're actually fighting over two rights that they both have and behaviors that they both exhibit, right? So, literally, they're crazy to not realize that they're fighting over the same things. And you need currency and property together for money, right? Currency doesn't have to be coinage. Currency can be any kind of social currency, whether it's standing or when you're canceling someone, most likely you're canceling their currency. You're not canceling their property. That's one of the reasons the left is so focused on this. This is one of the kinds of ways that they view the world. And so basically, if you're not based and woke at the same time, you need to be based and woke.
You're not based, woke, and red pilled, you can go right fuck off.
Right? You're just not even in the conversation. You're not even participating in it. So this is like the kind of thing, like I can say that to someone, you know, they'll get into a dumb argument and they'll be taking everything from the currency perspective, and I'll bring in the property perspective, and they're done. They're done. They have nothing. And the reason why is because I think it's true. There's a lot of derivative ideas from Civgene that bring us to this point. So I'm going to look at Austin's thing. You say psychopaths are the way they are because they have no ability to think abstractly. They don't have the ability like we do to think abstractly, and that is part of their problem, but there's a lot more problems than that, and I'm going to get into it. Yeah, so let's see. Where was I going to go next? So, well, let me just say this. I'll come back to it. I will elaborate, I promise, but I'll come back to it because I have it laid out. Intelligent psychopaths can and probably do manipulate you. You know, if you interact with them, they do manipulate you. You don't have to fall for it, you know, but if you're tricked, you'll end up being poorer, you'll end up having fewer erections, you'll fight with your friends and your family, you'll make bad choices, your life will just be worse. So don't let them manipulate you. So I'm going to get into what is a psychopath, and I can go into it from there. So psychopaths are highly logical, high testosterone, aggressive sex machines. Basically, that's what they are. And Dr. Hare, who is like the real-life psychopath whisperer, has started trying to tease them out from the prison population when one of them tried to kill him by cutting his brake lines in the prison shop. So in other words, he's a psychologist in a prison. In late 60s, I think is when he started, and he somehow slighted a psychopath, and he decided that he was going to kill him by cutting his brake lines. And on the way home, his brakes failed, and you know he could have easily died. So he's like, why did this person try to murder me? That doesn't make any sense with what I know about psychology. And that's how Dr. Hare got started on the, yeah, you can bring that down. Dr. Hare got started on the journey to psychopath understanding. So Hare estimates that psychopaths are 1 to 5% of the population. So the number is close, in my opinion, the number is closer to 5%, and there's a reason for this. Now just think about what 5% would be. That's one psychopath in every class you had in public school. I mean, that means there's one in every classroom. One of the other kids is a psychopath. And that's about 16.5 million people in the United States. So there's a lot of them out there. You know, they're not being pinned down in any statistical way. Once you realize that they are the highest functioning mental illness, you start to understand why. They can get jobs in the most prestigious careers. So some of them are probably acting as gatekeepers to getting real stats on psychopaths. And this is part of the problem. They're part of the system that's supposed to define them, and they don't necessarily want to be defined. So, you know, psychopaths are not all killers. So, you know, it's freaking ridiculous, okay? There's a lot of, there are killers who are psychopaths, and it makes for great TV, and it makes for great movies, but that's not typically what they are. Yes, they can kill, so can we, you know? And this is an important point, is that empaths or non-psychopaths have all the things the psychopaths have, right? And this is important to keep in mind, that we are psychopaths with an empath put on top. I have an analogy I like. I'm just going to blast through it quick. It's not my best analogy. I know Steve will get it, but you may not get it if you don't know cars. Our conscience is kind of like a supercharger on our engine. You know, our brain is our engine and our conscience is a supercharger. You know, it enhances and makes our engine more powerful, right? And this is what we're starting to get into what Austin was talking about here, with that creativity comes from that supercharger. That's the part of the engine that gives us that creativity, and that's why they tend to be almost Vulcan-like. I think that Gene Roddenberry may have been onto something specific with that. So, All right, so where was I? Oh yeah. So they can. Oh yeah. So they typically are callous and glib. You know, the reason that they're like that is because they don't have empathy, right? So they just come across as not caring about anything because they're not compelled to care about anything by their conscience, right? So it seems like we all carry the genes, and this is an important point. So we all have the genetics to have a psychopath child. Anyone can have a psychopath child, and psychopathy, I think, is genetic, and hair does too, and there's good reasons for it. Basically, they're the one mental illness that therapy makes worse, right? If you put a psychopath in in therapy, they get worse. If they don't get worse, they're not a psychopath. They were misdiagnosed. So let's get into. Okay, so they're typically attracted to positions of power over other people. So this is the problem for them is this kind of outs them. They think of all relationships, like I mentioned before, as being hierarchical. Like they either want to, they don't know how to interact with someone as an equal. It's just not in their lingo. They only want to interact with you as a subordinate or as a superior. So they're constantly trying to reform society in that shape of things. That's the shape that they want to exist in. So, sorry, sip. Your relationship will always be strife until you accept one of these positions. So if you want to if you have to get along with a psychopath, like let's say you have one who's your boss, and you have to get along with them, first of all, look for a new job. But also, you know, if you decided that you don't have a choice and you have to stay in that job and you have to find a way to get along with them, let them be the boss, but try to keep the interactions public, right? So originally the Civgene site, by the way, was mostly advice about how to deal with psychopaths, and that's when I started reading all these sources. That's when I started putting all this other stuff together. So how do you spot a psychopath? How would you know if your boss is a psychopath? So here's a trick. They may not even know they are different, and they don't know why. Psychopaths are hyper competitive. So if they're in the narcissistic stage, they may not realize that they're being competitive with you. And so this is a problem because they're actually most dangerous when they're in a narcissistic stage. And I know I'm going to actually use some definitions, and I'll talk about this later, of narcissist and antisocial personality disorder and psychopath in a way that's not conventional, and I'll explain it later in the talk. But they are not going to have, they may, if you call them out, actually there's something known as narcissist rage. Usually calling them out and identifying that they're psychopathic or a psychopath while they're a narcissist will actually cause them to fall into a narcissist rage, which actually will be very dangerous for you because they're more disoriented than you are in that situation, which is saying something because they're pretty enraged. Yeah, you can look that up if you want to look up more about it. Some amazing stories about narcissist rage. But, you know, psychopaths can be very dangerous if you think you're dealing with one, so you should try offhand methods first. So if you think if you're trying to figure out you're dealing with a psychopath, there's ways that you can interact with them and test them directly to see if they are. And I do it all the time, but it's not advisable, especially not as a first step. You're going to need to figure out who in the people of your life is a psychopath now in order to get to that step, right? You're going to need to positively identify them. The problem with this is that there's a concept in psychology known as projection, which is very real. And you can project personality traits onto other people. In other words, make it look like a personality attribute, an undesirable, usually, personality attribute is actually coming from another person. You can use this for good, too. You can actually make it look like someone's more honorable or more kind or more patient than they are by projecting those things on them. But Yeah, you can. So psychopaths use this to project their psychopathy at other people. So if you're looking at a crowd of people and you think you know the person who you know personally, you have to need to know some information for this to work. Won't work on celebrities at a distance, so that's a huge mistake. It's very difficult because celebrities are all, politics is appearance, so they're all about making themselves look a certain way, right? So get the hair checklist. So one of the things that hair is known for is creating this hair checklist. So it's the hair checklist is a test that they use in jails and courts all over the world to determine if someone's a psychopath, right? And they actually call the result of that, if they determine that they are, antisocial personality disorder. But that's just a political thing, and I'll get into that a little more later. Oh, wait, what's this? Almost like psychopaths have brains that are abnormally defensive of their ego. What's it? What is ego to a psychopath? Oh, that is such a great question, Austin. Wait, you're on the right track. We'll get to it. He's so ahead of me. He's front running me here. So, do the psychopath checklist, hair psychopath checklist, the PCL-R. You can actually just download it. It's available all over the place on the internet. And it's a relatively short survey you take about people to figure out if they are a psychopath or not. But the key is not to just give it to the person you think's a psychopath. Also key in people that are interacting with them that you also know personally, right? So mutual acquaintances or mutual friends or family. And when you do this, what happens is you may realize that the person you thought was a psychopath isn't at all. That may just be the person that the psychopath is deemed a threat and is in turn projecting on. So that's a good intro to get you into the ability to spot a psychopath, because once you have your first psychopath, you're going to understand what you're looking for a little bit better. You're going to intuit it. Your conscience is going to get prototyped with okay, that's a psychopath. You're going to start getting the idea. All right, where was I? Right, so actually, Austin, I think that psychopathy has a natural progression, just like empathy does, in wants, abilities, and limits. So I guess I wasn't going to bring this chart up yet, but let's bring it up. So see if we can bring that wants, abilities, and limits chart up. Where do you check this out? This is mine, by the way. So this is one of the things that I figured out with Civgene, is that wants, abilities, and limits is a logical progression. And what Freud actually figured out is normal humans, or empathy, Freud was unaware of psychopaths. And this is actually a problem with a lot of historical philosophers. They write their philosophies for one set of humans. There are two distinct behavior sets of humans. So, and of course he wrote ego and superego, which is really just wants, abilities, and limits. There's nuance, but that's essentially what it boils down to. Well, it turns out that all the definitions of diseases that were probably just renamed cases of psychopathy, but they didn't want the stigma of being labeled a psychopath, are narcissist, antisocial personality, and sociopath. Narcissists are unaware that they're psychopaths, just like an id stage. They're just, to them, the world just revolves around them. It's a movie, it's a Truman Show, and they're Truman, right? And eventually, and the thing that gets a psychopath to advance through these stages is intelligence. You know, in the case of an empath, you've actually got two sets of things that can get you to advance from an id stage or an ego stage or superego stage. And if you're trying to understand what those look like, go watch The Simpsons. They actually intentionally made the Simpson characters id, ego, superego. Lisa's the superego. Homer is the id. So Bart is the ego. So they play it out in the show. So that'll give you an idea what the different components are. So, but psychopaths, so they're in that narcissist stage. They get out of if they're intelligent enough, or if they get triggered, they end up in antisocial personality disorder. So narcissists, it's all about me, but completely unaware of what they are. Antisocial personality disorder is, oh, okay, I know what I am, and it's my world, and I can rewrite the rules as I see fit. Now, a sufficiently intelligent person will listen to that and go, oh, that can't possibly be true, because eventually cops show up, the SWAT team shows up and kills you, right? Well, of course, an intelligent psychopath will also figure this out and advance to the point of sociopath, realizing that society is placing limits on them. And this is why they're constantly trying to reshape society as a top-down organization without any cooperation. This is the key, right? So, and that's the reason that I bring this up in this context, was to help you to understand when you're doing the psychopathy checklist, that if you read a scholarly work, which is probably accurate except for the labeling on narcissism or sociopaths, that you may be actually just talking about a psychopath, and that's a legitimate, and if anything, which one you spend is most closely resembles them will give you an idea what stage they're in. So that should give you pretty much the terrain you need to actually identify any psychopaths in your lives, and hopefully help you. Now again, you know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I never will be. I'm not interested in being. I'm more interested in the societal level effects. But if you think there is a psychopath in your life, the first thing you might want to do is go find a therapist, because you might need it as you redefine your relationship with them. And make sure they understand psychopathy too, or it's gonna go poorly. Because not all of them do. Because the industry doesn't necessarily understand it either. They've split it into these fractured cells, and if they don't understand the politics of why you would do that, they may not see this as a possible progression. So typically the advice you get from no, you can take it down. Thank you. Yeah, so that's the last chart. No more torture for Steve. Typically, the official advice is no further contact. If you find out someone's a psychopath in your life, you cut them off. Now, that's advice for you. That's not advice for them. And this is one of the things that I've been figuring out as I've been reading stuff about psychopaths. There's very little love for them. There's, which is disappointing, because we're supposed to be the ones that are capable of love for someone who isn't directly related to us. By the way, that's a whole other can of worms. I'm going to help you guys and give you a cheat. I gave this as a quiz to a conference I did once. I showed them pictures of bees and ants, and I said, why is society not this? And actually, one person, the video is up, by the way. I can put up a link to it later. But one person actually smartly said, "Oh, they're all family." That's right, they're all family. Those are all sisters, right? Ants and bees are all sisters. That's why they have that kind of society. Families taking care of each other is not weird. It even shows up in invertebrates. You know, most animals, not all, there's some amphibians and insects, but most animals will take care of their family. So loving your family, loving your children, loving your parents, loving your siblings, even loving your cousins isn't weird in the animal kingdom. Loving people you don't know is weird. That is very human. So, all right, anyway. Okay. Some of this is off the cuff. I'm actually surprised how off script I'm going here. So, one other thing, if you're in a situation where you can't break contact, but you don't feel comfortable that you understand a psychopath, and you think that maybe your life or your livelihood or your happiness is in danger, probably one of them is, then make sure to make the contact public. Make it a public place. Go where there are other people. And this is really one of the things that horrifies me the most about this pandemic, is that people are not able to go into the public that much. But video record things, audio record things. And of course, the most dangerous place for a psychopath is in a courtroom, because they are very susceptible to perjury. They tend to have scripts, so they'll run, they come up with, like I have this script here. Like, I can go off script. I'm following this just to make sure I don't miss anything. But I have these concepts in my head, and I can kind of wander around them. They don't. They just have the script, and if you try to take them off script, they're lost. And that's what a good lawyer who recognizes they're dealing with someone who's psychopathic or a psychopath in a courtroom will do. They'll try to get them to go off script, and then they'll lie. They won't mean to. They just won't have a good enough story concocted ahead of time, right? And then, boom, they've committed perjury. That's against the law. Now they're going to jail. Doesn't mean that everybody who commits perjury is a psychopath. There's plenty of good reasons why a ordinary, nice, kind, caring, normally productive member of society would commit perjury like by accident, maybe to protect someone because someone's life is in danger. There are reasons, but it's not a good environment. That's the worst possible environment for a psychopath. So there are tools you can have to defend yourselves. I have more tools. I have a lot more tools. And some of them are on the site if you search around. There's a tag called Defense Against the Psychopath. If you go there and you just read that stuff, you'll find some additional things I'm not talking about in here. So, it's not, no, Austin, I don't think so. Psychopaths are not just doing what will feed their sense of self. They're actually trying to recreate the environment around them to reflect how they think about the world. So it's a little different than that. We would do that. We would totally do that. Our subconscious would do that, and we wouldn't even know it was doing it. But no, they're not trying to do that. They're just trying to reshape the world into their understanding of. They think empathy is fake. They think we're Muppets, and they think that either we're idiots or if we're intelligent enough to not act like a Muppet, that we're faking it to play along like they are. They may rationally know that that's not true, but they have no evidence within their own brains to show them that that's not true. All right, so in other words, Civgene could only have been figured out by someone who is not a psychopath, because you need to be able to look at both sets of behavior. And again, we're a superset of them. They're a subset. So I was in a meeting, Austin said, I was in a meeting when there was a guy who said that he grinds so hard at work after his mom died, he'd be right back the next day. Yeah, absolutely. So there's plenty, you can't just go by single events like that, but that could be a symptom. That would be something that a psychopath would do. They would just look at it and be like, well, that's too bad. They would feel, because it's an immediate family member, they would feel lost. They do feel love for immediate family members, but it wouldn't be like the conscience where it was constantly tugging at you and bothering you. Like empaths, normal people, get so upset when family members die, they see ghosts, right? They hallucinate. Think about how crazy it is. Yes, that is the best compliment, David. Yes, I kind of feel, you know who I feel like? Sometimes I feel like Blade, right? For vampires, I feel like Blade for psychopaths. So, and you know what? There's a difference though, and I don't want to draw that analogy too strongly because I actually don't have it in for them. I feel bad for them. We have a society based on empathy, and we show none for them. So we gotta, I'm only gonna give what I get back, but we gotta create a situation where they can expect better from us. Maybe they'll stop thinking we're faking it at that point. All right. So, why me? Why did I figure this out? Is that what I wrote in here? Oh yeah, why do I think I'm the smart one? So, right place, right time. That's what this is about. So, basically, this needed to be figured out, but I'm definitely, I'm a little. Did I culturally appropriate Blade? You know what? I can't culturally appropriate Blade because everyone's like doesn't even know he exists, right? Like, oh yay, it's Black Panther's the first black superhero. No, he's not. You didn't even watch more movies. Anyway, so
read more comics.
Read more comics.
Back shop.
Remember, beast and woke. You got to be both.
And red pill.
All right, step. I think I got myself out of that one. All right, so I live in New York. I think New York is a psychopath hive because there is so much power in this city. There is a ton of power around this, the financial markets and to the United States. The United States is the world policeman. So we control the world here. And psychopaths know that, and they come here to be part of that. They come here to be part of that. So I live in a place where I have got lots of anecdotal data. I have been exposed to lots of psychopaths in my life. Most of them now avoid me. I mean, some of them actually just run the other way because I see them. And they're not, like that thing in Dexter where Dexter can see other serial killers. They can do, real psychopaths can do that with other psychopaths. They'll figure out pretty quickly if they're dealing with a psychopath or someone who's psychopath aware, and they'll get away from them. Not all of them, There are psychopaths who are trying to operate as a transparent part of society, but they're very few.
And
And
they typically butt heads.
what?
Do they typically butt heads?
They typically avoid each other also, right? So, and this is one of the crazy things. If you think about the society they want to create,
Is it self-aware enough to avoid someone, or is it more subconscious?
it's not subconscious. It's just that they realize that they're not doing Muppet things, right? So if one of the things, just as one of many, many possible things, the 10,000 yard stare, right? You're not acting like a Muppet if you've seen active combat, right? They see that in someone's eyes and they're like, no, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with that, right? They don't want to die. They're extremely logical to themselves. It's a selfish logic, right? They'll do the right thing for them every time. And they see someone who can see through them, and they're gonna, I'm out of here. So yeah. All right. So yeah. So I was born at the right time. Whoever figured Civgene out had to be born after computers, and most likely was going to be a computer geek. Maybe that wouldn't be their only specialty. There are plenty of great geneticists out there who are also great computer geeks, but it had to be a computer geek. And it had to be somebody who was interested in marketing. It had to be someone who was interested in psychology, right? Those things had to be, and here's why. So after he figured out the hair, Hare decided to try some tests with the brand new machine, the MRI. Now, if you don't know how an MRI works, an MRI is based on a computer. So a computer analyzes the data and presents it in a coherent fashion, right? And this is like, microcomputers are brand new when Hare is doing this. This is a very expensive experiment. But he would put people into MRIs, and he realized the people based on the hair who were psychopaths, when he had them, he was doing different kinds of tests. When he had them read curse words or emotionally charged words, like the F word or death or cancer, right? Right now, all you people watching, I made your brains light up. They lit up like Christmas trees. A psychopath's brain does not light up. It's stagnant, right? The reason our brains are lighting up is because, and this is one of the things I figured. This is the second thing I figured out with Civgene, after the fact that psychopaths predate other humans, that we evolved from psychopaths. So that's the first thing. The second thing I figured out was this, and the third thing was the wants, abilities, and limits chart. So that when our brains light up, I don't know if you've ever searched for something on your hard drive or on your computer, but it's a wildcard search. You're basically going, okay, look at the whole hard drive and look for this. And your hard drive, the red hard drive light comes on solid, and it's because your hard drive is just completely thrashing trying to find this thing. That's what your brain is doing. It's a wildcard search. The reason your brain is lighting up is what you're actually seeing is your conscience. It's actually connecting all of the memories, because when you remember things, this is how this works. When you remember things, your brain remembers how you felt when that happened. So every memory associated with fuck will be activated at the same time through this secondary information system. And that's what the conscience is. And here's the cool thing. The advantage to this is it's fast, right? You might say, okay, well, what's the evolutionary advantage? Why would we have this? We have all these side effects like currency and property and things like that, where we do things that change our world, that make an economy, right? But those are actually side effects of a risk engine. It's really fast at figuring out danger. And I'll give you a good example. Imagine a person who's seen the following things. They've seen a monkey in a rage in a zoo, right? Just completely freaking out, breaking stuff, attacking other monkeys, and a muscular male monkey doing that. And they've seen a person, a growling, angry, large, muscular person before, like a man, like somebody who's like a professional wrestler, and they're out of their mind with rage, right? But they've never in their whole life seen a gorilla. The second they see a gorilla, they're going to feel fear. That's the conscience. Because the conscience is going to superimpose those two things and go, oh, that thing's going to kill me, right? That's how the conscience works. That's just one possible example of many, many, many. It isn't smart so much as it's connecting unlike things by similar properties, right? That's what it's doing, and it's fast. We've all had insights, right? When you have an insight, that's actually your conscience doing that. That's your boom, oh, I know how to solve it. This is why you solve problems while you're sleeping, because you can suddenly solve the problem because these relationships, these emotional relationships between memories are being cataloged while you sleep. That's what your brain is actually doing. That's why you solve problems in your sleep. You're not actually solving the problem in sleep. The problem is solved when you sleep, and you understand it as you wake up, because it's the first time you're seeing two unlike things that didn't necessarily have a connection before, right? That's what I think is happening. We're getting a little abstract here, but that's, I think, the process that's going on behind this. Our risk engine has a lot of other emergent properties, and one of them is the imagination. That's where that comes from. So that's the answer to your question, Austin. I needed to do this background to give you. That's why psychopaths don't necessarily have creativity. Hare actually had a great. I can't beat Hare's quote on this. I don't have it in here, so I'm paraphrasing. But basically, they can read the words, but they don't hear the music. So they know, if they listen to a song, they'll read the words and they know what it means. They can tell you what the tempo is, but they don't feel it like we feel it, right? And that's how they see all of life. It's kind of hollow, right? It's like not seeing. It's like we're all seeing things in 3D in color, and they're just seeing it through a black and white CRT, an old TV. That's and it's good because it helps give them clarity. But, and everybody needs rational clarity sometimes, but it also creates all these secondary problems in society. And one of them is that I think that we get into economic collapse because they breed faster. I don't know am I up to this? Oh, I got to do it now. They breed faster than other people. Like I said, they're high testosterone sex machines. The women too. Psychopaths are evenly distributed between women and men. So if you see a woman who's like almost like a hyperactive sex machine, and there is a higher likelihood that that's coming from testosterone, and testosterone is more likely when they're a psychopath. So that may be why they look like that. So, which is weird, because you would think that men would have evolved to not be attracted to that, but apparently it's too nuanced. We just haven't done it. Actually, women are also typically attracted to psychopath men. They are usually attractive. They are usually beautiful. They're typically more symmetric. That's actually one of the subtle features. And this is dangerous. That's why I wanted to talk about doing the hair first. Don't just, oh, he's symmetric, it must be a psychopath. But yeah, actually, they typically are more symmetric.
Not psychopathic then.
What?
Not psychopathic.
Yeah. He's got the hair on one side, right? Yeah. No, that's that's your currency statement. That's your woke statement. I am not a psychopath. My hair's to one side. Very, very. Yeah. So, but I think that some of our cultural nuance actually does come from this. So I don't think that's necessarily
Would you
inaccurate.
consider watches like part of symmetry or lack thereof?
Watches? Oh, no. I'm talking about physical features. Like their face is symmetrical.
Oh.
Yeah, like their body and their face are more symmetrical. My face isn't symmetrical. You can't normally see it because I do this on the camera. But if I look straight on the camera, I'm embarrassing myself now. If I look straight on the camera, my nose is crooked. And it's not just because I got punched a few times. My jaw's a little off. My eyes are a little uneven, right? That's normal. Most people are like that. That's one of the things that makes us so good at seeing faces, at human faces, because our faces aren't as symmetric as we imagine. But psychopaths are. What?
You don't think it makes sense like clothing and like how they dress themselves?
Probably because they're used to seeing it in their bodies. So, I mean, I imagine they would. But I don't know. I mean, again, I can't project conscience-like attributes on their personalities. Oh yeah, Laura's asking if you could post the site.
Civgene.manewhall.net?
No, Civgene.matthewnewhall.com. Now, I would say don't read it while we're talking because it is heavy reading. I am unapologetically, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to take questions, because you may never get to ask these questions on the site because I'm going to give you a 10-paragraph answer. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, so let's keep going. Why am I doing this? Why am I continuing to talk about the civilization gene and pushing for this thing, even though I don't have the credentials? I'm fighting academia. I'm fighting a throng of censorship that wasn't there in 2011. So all this stuff is like making this harder, not easier. Because I'm not an official accredited source. I'm not. I think all of these claims are falsifiable. I have details up on the site if you want to look that up. If you're into looking at how a scientific study would work, it's up there. So I have these. I have all these great secrets. Why would I share it? I should just keep it to myself, right? I can manipulate people. I can manipulate psychopaths in a way that not only most other people don't understand, but psychopaths, I know things about psychopaths they don't even know about themselves. That's part of those secrets I was talking about. I use them as a defense.
So you think you could spot a psychopath right away and just say a psychopath?
Maybe it depends. A very intelligent
Attractor for their face.
A professional. Let's put it this way: a narcissist stage psychopath, like that, probably. A professional politician a lifetime politician who's also a high IQ sociopath, they're good. They're really good at hiding. So it depends on, this is why, again, the bigger the celebrity, the more likely they are getting away with it because they've had all this practice, right? They probably had to be intelligent to get there in the first place, and they've had tons of exposure. So, not saying all celebrities are psychopaths. I'm just saying any kind of job with power, a policeman, a politician, a business person, psychopaths love these jobs because it gives them power over their situation, power over other people. And one notable exception is the military, because there's a real risk of death. The military is all about oaths to protect to protect a country. What's more abstract than a country, right? And with your life. Psychopaths don't do that. If you're a cop, you're on the street and you can control your situation. That's completely different. You get all this power and very little checks on that power. But a soldier, no. So, why am I doing this? I've actually succeeded because of this. I quit my job 5 years ago. I've already, Civgene has already made the world a different place for me. So this isn't about me anymore. This is about the world. And yes, I do care about people, but 178 pages, 178 posts on that blog are probably a little too much. It's probably a little too crazy to go that far, right? What I'm really worried about is nuclear destruction. And what I'm talking about, let me read what I wrote because I can be a little more specific. I want to not die. So let's just say that. And I think a lot of psychopaths want to not die too. So maybe this segment, if they were watching this is for you, right? So, if you split an atom, right, it's no longer a radioactive heavy metal, right? If you have a plutonium atom and you split it in two, it's just pieces of atom. It's not an atom anymore. You're not going to have any resulting plutonium in the environment. But so that's how a nuclear weapon works. But if a nuclear power plant explodes, it spreads little tiny pieces of radioactive material, possibly for as many as hundreds of miles in every direction. Right? This is what happened in Fukushima. This is a huge problem, and Fukushima wasn't a fluke. Fukushima is a result of a bad old design for reactors, and there's a lot of it all over the world. If we have an economic collapse, there is a real risk of people who work power plants, nuclear power plants, not going to work, right? Of them creating an interruption in service to the power plant. Non-type 1 reactors can explode if they aren't tended to for as little as a week, right? So all it takes is 1 week of no service to a nuclear power plant. This is why I love Mad Max. It is a great movie. It is a great universe. I think a lot of people are worried about Mad Max. That's not going to happen. We're all going to die if it's Mad Max. Because the second that people stop showing up to that power plant, 1 week later, the world dies. So let me give you some numbers here. So there are 73 boiling water reactors and 300, and I hand counted this because of course nobody's doing good stats on nuclear power plants because that's not important. 306 pressurized water reactors made in either type 1, type 2, or early type 3 styles. So what we need is type 3 plus or type 4 reactors. Basically, if, say, a dozen of those go off, it's going to be enough to poison the environment enough that people will not want to go outside anymore, and it's over. The rest of them will blow, right? This can easily become a cascade effect. So I'm really worried because we're starting to look, this pandemic has created economic conditions that have slowed enough that I'm beginning to worry that the economy might stall. And if that happens, it might be the end of the world. We may eradicate all life with a plutonium radiation bath that lasts for several 100,000 years. Remember, human beings are relatively new. We may not survive this, much less any other species that we depend on. We would definitely destroy the ecological system, and it won't come back the same way, and it probably will be less favorable when it does. So, because remember, we co-evolve with that ecological system. So, people are worried about climate change. I worry about nuclear reactor cascade failure. And the reason I worry about this is because as psychopaths breed more quickly than other human beings, remember, again, people can randomly have psychopath kids, but psychopaths are more likely to have a psychopath child. Right? It's a higher likelihood. There are psychopath lineages also. So psychopaths are more sexually active. Why? They don't have a conscience. They don't feel bad about getting someone pregnant. They don't feel bad about getting pregnant. It doesn't bother them. Right? So they have more babies. So they're growing faster than everybody else. And eventually it gets to a point where they overwhelm the system. They're not just growing as a population, they're growing as a percentage of the population. And eventually it gets to a point where society can't support them anymore. And they collapse society. And this is one of the things that I was talking about in that other chart, in that political compass. That I think we're almost there. I think really the only thing between us and terror, just absolute destruction, the end, possibly the end of the earth if the power plants aren't manned, is cancel culture. If cancel culture becomes complete, if we react to everything by canceling it, there is literally nothing else to stop us from slipping into an authoritarian hell, which will doubtlessly create a reaction where the economy collapses itself. No, Laura, they don't have remorse. They absolutely don't. So they lack empathy. And it's just not, they don't have the wiring for it. They may have rational remorse. They may say, oh, that wasn't smart. And that's typically the mark of a sociopath, where they will look at something and say, okay, that wasn't smart. I'm not going to do that again. But it's not like other people where you get this signal nagging in the back of your head saying, don't do that, don't do that, do that, don't do that. I've for example, had that signal in the voice of my wife. I've had that signal in the voice of my mother. I've had that signal without a voice at all. Usually I don't hear voices. But, they don't have that voice. They just have a series of rational decisions. It's very quiet in a psychopath's mind, I think. Because, again, remember, if you can quiet your conscience, and this is something I wasn't planning on talking about today, but I guess I'll get into it, you can make yourself into a meta-psychopath, right? If you can learn to decide, okay, I have to do this. I have to train myself to be calm and to face the situation without being hyperbolic or emotional or having overreactions to things. That's, to me, is what I think it is. That's a meta-psychopath. And that is an empath who has emotions, but can put them aside temporarily and deal with them later. A couple of examples of careers where this would be useful: soldier, right? The military gives you training to try to get you into that state, to teach you to shut it off temporarily and deal with it later. And of course, dealing with it later is what we probably called PTSD, so, or shell shock, right? So, but also a spy. The real masters of this are going to be spies, because they have to go in and pretend to be terrible, heinous people, and then later on resolve that somehow. All right? But if they're not an empath, they're at a disadvantage, because they're not going to know how to deal with all the empaths. There is no IQ level where you can anticipate all the things the conscience does at the same speed it does it. It's just impossible. It's just, I think all of history's truly creative thinkers have all been empaths. They have not been psychopaths. I'm not saying psychopaths don't contribute. They do. I bet some of the world's top surgeons are probably psychopaths. You're not going to get squeamish then, right? So, so they have something to contribute, but it's not what we think of as great thinkers. All right, so enough about nuclear doom. Let's go on to other doom. Where was I? So, what happens if you don't? No, okay, we talked about that already. So, what's in this for the psychopaths? Why would they go along with what I'm saying about creating a world where they're mentally ill, but they're restricted from certain jobs? So the quick answer is they want to not die, right? I want to not die, and they want to not die, and they need to stop taking this economy and this social system that we created and reorganizing it into something that they understand more easily, that they're more comfortable with. Because the problem is things like governments and money and things like property and things like friendship go away, right? Friendship is a human right, actually, because and as a quick example, I like friendship because it's a weird one, but the equivalent in the animal kingdom is an alliance, right? Okay, we're going to leave each other alone to prevent each other from being exhausted, right? Friendship is a right because not only do we leave each other alone to prevent becoming exhausted, but we have the expectation that we're going to do it again for each other in the future. That's the key component to all these human rights between empaths and psychopaths. I think human rights actually evolved along with the conscience and are behavior-based. And they are defined as behaviors that separate us from the animal kingdom, right? If we do something that the animal kingdom doesn't, and of course it's not a terrible behavior, it's a beneficial one. Being bipedal doesn't make us, being bipedal isn't a human right, even though there are a few bipedal animals, but what does make us, every single one of these rights has in common is that there's a component where we abstract the future and we try to look out for the future. Investment's a human right. That's another example. That's investment may be the core of all those things. So actually I'm working on a paper for human rights, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, is I didn't want to erase all the stuff that I have in my mind about that and retool to work on the dystopia report, which I still love. We're going to still do it. But I just wanted to take a break and talk about Civgene. Also, so I could point my future guests to this. I want my guests to see this video. If they're interested. If they're not interested, that's fine. So they can see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Civgene, because it sounds kind of weird and crazy and abstract, and you have a kooky, that's cool, you have a kooky philosophy. A lot of the things that I post on the internet, a lot of my philosophies, it all comes from Civgene. My financial strategies, a lot of who I am, it's just intertwined into my life at this point. But anyway, getting back to psychopaths and why they would go along with trying to make a more psychopath-aware world, is not only just not dying, but we have a big responsibility on us to end witch hunts, right? Witch hunts are
Based.
scary for psychopaths. They're not based. That's funny. Well, I get, witch hunts aren't based. Witch hunts are the reaction to the collapse of rights, which is propagated by the collapse of the economic system, which is created by them pushing the economic system to look more how they see the world. But it doesn't actually function like that. It won't function in that environment. So it's based and woke. Witch hunts are based and woke and broken. That's the thing. This is the part that's really broken. The really based and woke thing to do would be to go, we shouldn't hunt people because they have a mental illness. We should just stop fucking putting them in charge, right? You don't put a blind person in charge of driving the bus. You don't put a psychopath who doesn't have any idea how most of the people who work for them feel in charge of running a company or a country or a state or a charity. You just don't. It just doesn't make any sense. They don't have the qualifications to do the job. So they end up faking it. They can take advice from the people around them, but they don't know which advice is good. So they just end up taking crazy advice, right? So we need the non-psychopaths of the world actually need to shape up. We need to shape up. And to get some idea of how this would work, I actually have, well, among the many articles I have up on Civgene, I have an article up there called Sponsored Sociopathy. And it talks about how this might work. Basically, it's just like being an addict. You have a lifetime sponsor, and that sponsor, and it can change over time, but you always have to have a sponsor as a psychopath, and you count on that sponsor to help you navigate through social situations which normally require you to have empathy to give you the nuance to know how to navigate them, right? That is the responsible way to handle this. And of course, now we have that opportunity. We have extreme risk because of nuclear power plants, but we also have that opportunity because of computerization and those MRI spec tests that Hare did. Now we have a way to find the gene. We have a way to find the gene. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, we can do sponsored sociopathy. And this is actually something that Hare alluded to in his book, but he wasn't willing to commit to it because he didn't feel that he had the clout to, which if anyone had it, it would be him, because he just got out of a huge fight over not calling people who were confirmed to be psychopaths from the Hare psychopaths, instead by calling them antisocial personality disorder. And I can't blame him. You can't win every fight. That's why I can win this fight when he can't, because I'm outside academia, so they can't cancel me, right? You can't cancel someone who, as a professor, who isn't a professor in the first place. And they can't cancel you either. And this is the final point. This is what gives me hope. We have all the things we need to do this. Because of CRISPR, genetics is super, super cheap, right? And it's getting cheaper by the day. A backyard or shade tree geneticist might be capable of finding the psychopath gene, right? So all you need is to have non-psychopaths and psychopaths to compare to each other, and some kind of genetic material to catalog and to search. And you can begin the search. And as a SETI at home type project, this would be relatively easy to do. So my suggestion to progress humanity into a type 1 civilization and get us a woke and based society, right, in the modern nomenclature, and to get us out of this ridiculous property versus currency fight that we're in, is to do a shade tree genetic search. All right, so I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Those are great questions, by the way. Oh, good, we got one. Yes, so we'll chain some questions. So David, by your theory, the psychopaths will game the system before that can even happen. Sorry, I don't know what that means. Oh, no, because they're not all powerful. So this is a lot of psychopaths, sociopaths in power will do like almost like a Wizard of Oz kind of thing, where they will try to, like, I'm the all-powerful Oz, you cannot destroy me. No, they're not gods, right? They just have a lot of people working for them that are also intimidated by them. That's all that they've got. They can't stop shade tree mechanics. It's just like shade tree geneticists. Shade tree geneticists are just like ghost guns. You can just do it. You don't have to tell anyone what you're doing. You just do it, and you say, hey, I think I might have found it. And then someone else confirms, yeah, I know a psychopath. That's the same gene in him. Oh, yeah, it's the same gene in her. Oh, yeah, it's the same gene in her. I'm pretty sure they're a psychopath, too. And you can put it together. Don't make it a witch hunt. Remember, this is a mental illness. We just have to, it's just that the current academic system does not know how to deal with it. There are psychopaths in academia. I worked in academia. I had 3 jobs in academia for 20 years as a doing computer support. and doing computer engineering type work. They're there. There are definitely psychopaths in academia. They can succeed. In fact, actually, there's another one. I met James Fallon, and that's up on look up James Fallon on my website. Actually sat down with him an hour. He is a PhD neurologist who identified from his own MRI that he's a psychopath. And so he is a self-admitted PhD level scientist psychopath. And he is exactly what I thought a sociopath would be. Very charming, by the way. And it was fun talking to him, and of course it was in public too. Yeah, actually, I think that one of the ideas for sponsored sociopathy came from him describing his relationship with his wife. His wife is his sponsor. She accepts what he is and helps him. And that's what they need. But what we don't need to do is we don't need to put them in charge of stuff. That's very bad. That'd be bad consequences. I got two more. Thank you, Miguel. I appreciate it. And how do we defeat these Wizard of Oz characters in power? Well, the main thing is just go pick up a book. My favorite book on this topic is Hare's own book. It's actually relatively easy to read, Without Conscience, by Dr. Hare and Dr. Robert Hare. And just look it up and buy it and read it, and it will open your eyes and you will see the world in a new way. There are tons of psychopath books out there. Most of them has something to contribute, but I would start with that one. That's the right place to start. And if everybody just knew about them, if people actually talked about them not as Dexter, but as they really are, selfishly logical, pervasive, male and female, defectors from our system of money, from our system of cooperation. They only compete, they don't cooperate. We compete too, but we also cooperate. That's the difference. We have an advantage. We need to build a society that's based on all of our advantages. Any other questions? All right. So this was a great show. I really, I started off a little awkward, but I feel like we got rolling at the end. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if you want more of these. I could do a follow-up, maybe do additional shows. All right. So don't forget to share this with people, especially this video. I want people to see this. So if you like this, the best thing you can do is share this video, send it to other people, whether they're scholarly or not. I'm willing to defend myself to any crowd. I'm prepared to get hit with tomatoes, mocked. No problem. Thanks, David. And whatever it takes, I will defend this to the best of my ability. So, and I will go in front of any group of people and discuss it. I'll go on any show. I'll do any interview.
And don't forget to smash that heart react.
Yes, and don't forget to like and share and choose wisely. Choose to share.